people. My name's Steve Carolan, the National Sales Manager of Dayco.
And I'm Matt Driver, Central Area Manager.
We've got a short presentation. Echo. Just to give you an overview of the current market and our future market and where we think the direction of the aftermarket is going in the future. Short agenda, quick overview of Dayco, then we talk about the vehicle car park and how that's changing and how that will affect our business. We'll then talk about our belt and aisle, PV belts, and then a quick overview of future of Dayco.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. So I don't know how many of you guys here are familiar with Dayco as a manufacturer in the OE and aftermarket. Hands up if you've heard of us, if not. Okay, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes talking about the history of Dayco. We've been in the market since 1905, so we're pretty solid in the OE and aftermarket. Throughout the globe, we currently have 15 manufacturing plants and across 22 countries, and that pretty much gives us global coverage. So going back to 1905, we actually started developing the white wall tyre on American vehicles. That led us in to grow the business through the Ford Model T. Then in the 1920s, we introduced the first raw edge belt. We all remember the old-fashioned belt, the cog belt, okay? So we were the pioneers of the raw edge belt. Moving into the 1930s, 1940s, we were helping the war efforts out with breathing apparatus, rubber dinghies, so we didn't stop production. We're a foregoing company. We wanted to continue developing innovative products. So into the 1970s, auxiliary systems became more demanding. So we required a more robust solution, which was the PV belt, or the poly V belt, as you know it. And that's the multi-rib belt that you see on many modern auxiliary drive systems, or front-end auxiliary drive systems. Okay, in the 1980s, we worked very closely with Cummins, and I'm sure you've all heard of Cummins. They're in industry, generation, marine, the list goes on, military. We developed the first ever automatic tensioner with Cummins. Cars at that time were predominantly chain-driven, and the VMs were looking at solutions as engines wanted to become smaller, more compact, higher output. We developed timing belts, which today is one of our core product ranges. So we were first to introduce the high tenacity belt, which is OE to Dayco, and that's a white Teflon belt that you'll take off 60 to 70% of vehicles that are belt driven. That's then led us into other developments, which Steve will come on to in some later slides. Some very exciting technical innovation that's going to be in the market for a few more decades. So I'm just going to talk about the UK vehicle park, and these slides are very interesting. There's a lot of involvement with EVs. We call them AFVs, which is alternative fuel vehicles. So that includes hybrids, BEVs, PEVs, and full EVs. And then ICE is internal combustion engines. So what's quite interesting from that slide, from 2010 to 2020, there's only about a 3% share of AFVs. Yeah? So all the BEVs, PEVs, EVs, 3% in the current car park as of today. Last year, total new car registrations were 1.35 million. Petrol and diesel, or ICE, internal combustion engines, equated to 66.5% of those sales. So we've not seen the end of a combustion engine yet. Great news for the factors that are here and the garages that are here. The expected 2021 alternative fuels vehicles in our car park, as I said in the previous slide, is expected to be 3%. So not many. Our car park, I'll explain how we formulated this data in a minute. So this is the car park 2021 to 2040. And of course, we can see the decline in internal combustion. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. However, we're forecasting in 2040, approximately 40% of the vehicles on the road will still have an internal combustion engine. And this is in the passenger car market. So we're not talking heavy goods vehicles which are running auxiliary and timing, etc., and still need servicing. So it's just going back to that. So I said I'd explain how we formulated this forecast. How do we possibly know what's going to be around in 2040? So as an original equipment manufacturer, we're lucky enough to have forecasts on our factories from the vehicle manufacturer or the VM. So the guys at Alfa Romeo, Citroën, Peugeot, Ferrari, Maserati, Porsche, Volkswagen, VAG, PSA, etc., list goes on. These are all OE manufacturers that we supply to. So we have the forecast so we can collate the data to suggest that we're going to have internal combustion engines on the road for a bit longer than what we probably most of us anticipated. And a good example of this, I've only picked one out, is the Ford 2-litre TDCi Transit belting oil. Steve will talk a little bit more about belting oil in detail a little bit later on. That's planned in production until 2030. That then enters the aftermarket in 2033. 2033. So, again, the car park we're going to see is ageing. So, very interesting. This is sourced from the Department of Transport, 1994. The average life of the vehicle, the average age of the vehicle on the UK roads was 6.7 years. We've jumped 2 years to 2020. People are keeping their vehicles for longer. Prices are going up, gas, electricity, you name it. Diesel's going to hit £2 a litre this week, or it probably has in some places. People can't afford to go and buy new vehicles. They're either trading them in, buying a second-hand car, or keeping their current vehicle. The RAC have also backed this statement up in 2022. So I think we can probably see the car park age peaking, maybe 10 years old, 12, who knows? We don't know. Another interesting statistic, this is the top UK vehicles on the road today. Okay, so we've got Ford Fiesta at the top, car park 3 to 10 years, 297,000, total park is 390. They're already in the aftermarket. You're selling parts for them, brilliant. We're manufacturing parts for them. Interesting that you'll actually notice that they're all petrol and diesel. Yeah. There's no AFVs in that calculation. It's all combustion engines. So, the future. We think the future is quite bright. We're going to be around for decades more with combustion engine. 2040, 2050, where we're going to put a cap on it. As I say, people are keeping the cars for longer. We're going to be producing the parts. You guys are going to be fitting them and selling them. We feel it's happy days.
Yeah. Hello? We're not saying that EV isn't important and you shouldn't get trained on that car park. But it's very important that you continue to do the training and keep up to date on internal combustion engine. There's new technology being introduced or has been introduced over the last couple of years into the OEs, and that will come into our market in the next couple of years. So absolutely EV will be important for the future, but so is the internal combustion engine, and that's going to be our core business and your core business for the next couple of decades. If you read the media and you would think that the petrol and diesel engines were going to disappear overnight. That's actually not the case. Yes, new car production is changing rapidly, but because of the current car park, we're going to have business in the diesel and petrol sector for a couple of decades. And that's what that was trying to illustrate. We introduced some new technology some years ago, and this is now starting to come into our market. We designed belting oil in 27 for Ford, but now it's in their mainstream production. The EcoBoost is used throughout their range, you know, from a Fiesta, Focus, Mondeo. Even the new Transit now has a belting aisle. This belting aisle is massively important, and it's going to give us as an industry, us and you, good opportunity for business in the coming years. Why did we introduce belting aisle? Well, noise reduction, NVH. That was the number one reason we introduced it. It reduced that in the cabin considerably over chain. And of course, cost saving. You know, when Ford introduced the original belting aisle, it was 20% cheaper than chain, which obviously when you're making millions of vehicles is a big number. Yeah, ease of fitment, they're easy to fit in terms of comparing with chain, and most are designed with long service life. We'll come back to that in a short while. And one of the most important nowadays is CO2 because of the drive of the European community to drive down emissions. That is the number one focus of all OEs at the moment, and they have very strict limits that they have to comply to. If they fall outside these limits, they're subject to millions of euros of fines from the EU. So belting oil is here. It's going to continue to increase in our market, and it's a big opportunity for you guys. The one I want to talk about mostly, and we also have a training program on our stand, which will go into it in much more detail, is the Puretech 3-cylinder petrol engine from PSA and Citroën. They don't produce a model now that doesn't use a version of this vehicle. One of the reasons they don't offer many different engines nowadays is to meet this EU CO2 target. If you go on to Peugeot site now, you see this and a 1.5 diesel, and that's pretty well across the whole range. There's no other choice. So we've sold millions of belts already, but we're going to see a lot more coming into the market over the next decade, and this is a big opportunity for us. Because Peugeot, originally when we designed this engine with Peugeot, the engine was, or the belt was designed to have a service life of 112,000 miles, which effectively is the life of the engine. Okay, because of issues I'll talk about shortly, they have recently changed that service interval from 112 down to 64,000 miles, which suddenly means these millions of cars on the road will need servicing by you guys, where originally that wasn't going to be the case. And so there's 64,000 miles is a pretty low time belt change. And so over the next years, you're going to see a lot of demand for this part, which is great for us because we'll be selling parts, but it's also business that you guys wasn't going to see originally. So it's a good opportunity. Another another thing that I've asked their workshops to do is check the belt every 16,000 miles or every 12 months. As I say, I'll come on for the reasons why. So basically, when you see one of these vehicles in your workshop, you need to check the belt. Okay? Because there's a risk that if you don't, and there's problems with the belt, then the engine will fail. Okay? Luckily, it's quite easy to check the belt. You can take the oil filler cap off, and you can see the back of the belt. Okay? So the first thing you need to do is to check the width of the belt with a tool. And again, if you come to our stand the rest of the afternoon or tomorrow, take part of the training, you get one of these tools for free. So basically you measure the width. If it's a go or not go. If it doesn't go, you need to do some further checks. If it goes on, then you have to also check the back of the belt. Okay? So if you see, you'll probably know what a back of the belt should look like, but if you see any degrading of the back, where it's delaminated, if you can see the cords, cords, or if you see that there's cracks in the back, you need to do some further tests. Okay, and it's really important that you do this because if the belt is deteriorated, then this causes problems for the engine. What happens is that little flakes of the belt can come away from the belt and will eventually get into the oil pump strainer.
Yes.
Okay, so the belt, if it's left, the belt doesn't fail, but what happens is the strainer gets blocked and the engine is starved of oil, and that's the failure. Okay, so it's important that if you see any damage or wear on the back of the belt, you check the strainer. It's fairly easy with the Peugeot because there isn't a gasket. There's about 8-9 bolts. The sun comes off, and you can easily see the strainer when you've lifted the car up. It's a relatively easy check. You only do that if you see the back of the belt has got an issue. Okay. If you find that, you absolutely need to change the belt. Okay, because the back will continue to delaminate. Okay. There are other checks that you need to do, but that's part of the more technical presentation on our stand. So I'd suggest if you've got time later, come over and have a look. Why is this happening? Contamination of the oil. What's happening is that there's fuel, petrol getting into the oil, and it's the fuel that causes the belt to degrade on the back, and that's the issue. 99% of all the engines that you check will be fine, probably 99.9%. But you do absolutely need to check when you get one of them vehicles in your workshop that the back of the belt's okay. As I say, it's a simple test. It'll take 5 minutes, if that. You literally reuse the light on the back of your phone, and you can see the belt. It's not a big issue, but you should do it. And it's only if you see issues there that you do the other check. As I say, 99% of the cars you see, you'll just move on. But it is important. There is no clear answer why the fuel is getting in the oil. You know, there's some evidence to say that people using these vehicles have very small stop-start trips cause it, but it is happening. So you absolutely need to check the belt. The reduced service interval should overcome a lot of these issues because you can check changing the belt on a much regular basis. But if you have one of these vehicles, a couple of minutes just to check it, it's worth it. Because if you don't, the engine could fail. Okay. Another thing to do is always use an OE branded product and the right spec. Okay, using the wrong oil also creates problems with the belt. You always need to use the recommended OE, which is a fully synthetic oil. Okay. So that's the belting oil. As I say, we do have a big presentation, or a 20-minute presentation, giving the more technical details, and I'd please ask you to come to our stand to have a look at that. And Glenn will give you one of the tools and far more details about the belting oil. Another new product, sort of, is auxiliary belts for specific applications. Okay, auxiliary belts, poly-V belts have been used for decades, but more and more because of stop-start, harsh environments, complex systems, we are making very specific belts for different applications because of the high loads. And we have about 30 in range, but 21 have Kevlar in them to make them much, much stronger. Okay, so this is something you need to be aware of. And there's one particular application that's current, which is on the Volvo. Okay, any of these vehicles, you should make sure that you always fit the right belt. The we produce a 5PK 1121K for Volvo. Okay, it's for this application has huge vibration issues within the system. If you use a standard belt, it will fail. Okay, when it fails, 50% of the time, it will take out the plastic timing belt cover. And taking that out will mean that it'll take the timing system out and it'll wreck the head. If you're lucky, it doesn't wreck the engine, but if it minimum will wreck the head. And so you have to be very careful with this application that you get the right belt. Now, the issue with some of you guys will be you don't always deal with a Dayco distributor, you'll buy your parts from different factors. If you buy a belt from a Gates distributor or Conti, you just need to make sure that they're giving you the right belt. Because if you look up on MAM, the reg, only a Dayco part number will come up, generally. There is no Gates or other supplier of this part. In good faith, because of history, a factory will look at the part number and say, oh, I've got a Gates reference of the same length, and give you that. Yeah, and they do that in good faith because that's what they've done for decades. That is not acceptable now on many applications, and particularly this one, because it generally writes the engine off. Okay, so if you have one of these and you're using a Gates factor, just double check, and if they haven't got it, you go to a Dayco factor for that part, because it will fail, and there's you've got no fallback, because it's not a belt. If you fit one of our competitors' belt, they won't recommend it for that application. So if you go back to them, they'll just say it's not fit for that application, right? So you have to check you have the K version. As I say, all you have to do is push back a bit if you have one of these to your factor, just to double check. But it is important because we've seen hundreds of these engines fail, and it writes the engine off, or at least, if you're lucky, it's the head, and you can't get these parts for love or money. So you're going to have your customer's car in your garage for a good 6-8 weeks trying to get the parts to fix, and that's going to be upsetting for the customer, probably you guys, and it's going to cost them a lot of money. So it's not a big range of vehicles, just sanity check and getting the right parts. There are others that we do, and as I said, you will see more and more of these coming onto the market. So it won't anymore be acceptable to just work on the size of the belt. Okay, and if you go to a factory and you say, oh, yep, we've got this 6PK 1000, it's 25 quid. Oh, well, but I'll do another 6PK 25 for 10 quid. Don't go for the cheapest option, because there'll be a reason for it now. Yeah, it's because of these belts are far more expensive to make, and that's the reason that they're there. So we're trying to illustrate you've got to be careful more and more with these products. It's not about just the length. And this is just a very quick overview of what we've got in our range, which I guess if you use Dayco you'll know. We do power transmission, cooling, wheel bearings, and steering and suspension. For Dayco, the future is also changing, because we are working on hybrids. So even though maybe the next 10, 15 years will still be predominantly diesel, petrol engines, yeah, we will also be part of the future, and we're working with all the OEs. That's it, thank you. Any questions? Well, look, if you've got questions, come over, see Glenn on our training, because he'll answer them. Okay.